The last thing I want to talk about here is a little more of a complicated process, but it's considered one of the biggest reasons for a lot of weight retention that we have. And it really is from inflammation. So it's really not weight like fats and or calories produced that we think it is. It's actually more like swelling in our body. I think it's actually a chronic problem that we have now, and we are using some of the old systems of losing weight for a system that doesn't react to that. So really how you have to think about it, the complication with inflammation is that it's usually very multifaceted. So there's not one reason for why we're experiencing it. So you really have to, that's why we really have to look at it from a histamine level. So it's almost like our body is having really subtle allergic reactions to something. It's showing up in inflammation because our body's trying to heal it, because swelling is our body trying to heal it. So it's trying to do all the right things, but because we've had too much of this situation, it's not able to heal it enough to get the inflammation to come down. And because it's so multifaceted, it's really hard to figure out and imagine what it is that is impacting it. But I like to use the histamine bucket example. And so when we're talking about inflammation, it can be things that our body's exposed to outside of it. It can be the foods we're exposed to inside of it. It can be the food, the excess of a certain type of food that's causing it. It can be a combination of foods that don't work well in our system that are causing it. It can actually be an allergy, but very rarely is that the main issue of a chronic inflammation, because we'd be able to identify it and tie it to something. Stress obviously is a big factor. Non-natural foods, processed foods is a big factor. So there's so many factors that can happen. So when you imagine the histamine bucket, what you're trying to imagine is that you put this food in that has a little bit of a histamine factor to you, but nothing really happens. You don't really notice it. Then you put another one in. And then maybe you're exposed to something toxic in your environment for a little bit. And your body keeps working through, because your body does have a natural detoxifying process. It works through all of these. But then you have a couple of days where you eat way more of something that upsets you, and you're exposed to way more, and it's very stressful, and the bucket starts to overflow. This is where you're exposed to some inflammation in your body, because your body literally, its processes weren't able to work away at working through it at the same rate that it was coming in. And so once that bucket overflows, that's where you're going to sort of see a level of chronic inflammation that you don't really understand what's happening. Your clothes just sort of don't seem to fit like they did a few days ago, or you feel bloated, and maybe even a headache, that kind of thing. Usually those are inflammation related. So it's hard to unravel all of that. But a few things you can do to work away at dealing with that are, one, notice any really subtle symptoms you have after you eat something. So sometimes people will find they don't have dairy allergy, but if they eat cheese, they sometimes get a headache. It doesn't mean you have to stop eating it. What it means is a couple of things. There might be alternative solutions for some situations. Like some people might find they like a non-dairy cream cheese product. So instead of cream cheese, they will use it, but they will still eat regular cheese at other times. Some people find cheese that's cooked is just broken down a little bit more, so it works in their system a little better. Others find that they're okay with cheese. They just don't drink milk anymore. It's all of these things. The other thing is people go, sometimes they don't actually want to face it, that this is causing them harm, but I encourage you to do it, because knowledge is power, in the sense that food isn't just about eliminating it for good and never being able to eat it again. It's about gaining the knowledge. So say you have an important meeting you want to go to, or you're doing a presentation and you just really want to feel you're on your game. that knowledge would be really good because you would know not to eat it right before that particular situation. Maybe you have it right after. Maybe it's something that you have on weekends when you can deal with stuff more. There's so many ways to work around these things, but you want to gain that knowledge. So don't be scared to find out something might be a little bit too much for you, because maybe you can eat it 2 days in a row, but not 3. And so you have to take a break and then eat it. There's so many ways around it. So I encourage you to keep watching this. A lot of people will find that heavy carbs like breads and stuff, they love them, they want them, but when they eat them and then eat other things behind them, it sort of feels like it blocks up your system. That's quite valid. It could be. For some people, it's actually not blocking up their system per se, but it's actually causing inflammation internally that gives them the sense that things are blocking up and can block things temporarily from passing through. So maybe it's something you want to eat later in the day. Maybe it's something you want to eat half of what you would normally eat every day to see if that eases. There's so many things that can cause these, and they can be combinations. So don't be discouraged that it's for sure that one thing. Maybe it was that one thing with another thing. Maybe it was eating that thing on a very stressful day where your digestion wasn't working as well. Maybe it's something you'll benefit from some supplements so that it'll help you process them more. There's always tons of ways to work around it, but inflammation is becoming a chronic issue. So going through this process is very valuable to figuring out what is best or better for your system. It's not about completely eliminating everything. And that information will give you value all the way around, because maybe it's not even a reaction that you're having. Maybe you just find when you eat certain things at lunch, you have more energy in the afternoon. And maybe some of those things you'd eat at lunch, you'd rather eat in the evening because it will help you relax and calm down. And maybe it helps with your cravings later on in the evening. So there are tons of ways to move things around, but basically what you're trying to do is find ways to give your body a break so that it can decrease that histamine bucket. And so tweaking, reducing, replacing, all these things will give your body a break and reduce it, in addition to not eating all the time. So as much as we've been told over the years, 5 small meals a day, doesn't really work for a lot of people, because you're actually not giving your body that break. And maybe it would have worked when we had less processed foods or less influenced foods, but right now it's not working for us anymore, because we need to give our body a break between meals, whether they're smaller meals or not. The point is your body needs a recovery period, and think of it as a recovery period to bring down that histamine bucket, so that it can then handle whatever comes in the next meal that maybe isn't completely in your best interest. So it's hard to read things sometimes, and it's hard to know what your body is always trying to tell you. But really what you're trying to do is work on the messaging you're saying to yourself before and during what you eat, and then in turn, work on what your body is trying to tell you before, like when it craves something, or after it has something to eat. All of it is information going back and forth both ways all the time, and all of it is in your best interest. So never be worried to try and figure out what you're saying and what your body's saying and how they're sending signals to one another, because nobody's going to tell you that you can't have something altogether. But the more that you work on helping your body, the more likely you will be able to accommodate the things you do want to have. So knowledge is power when you're trying to figure out what your mind and body are saying, and knowledge is power when you're looking at the foods that you're giving your body because of what they're saying and what you're telling your body by giving it those foods. So enjoy the process. Keep learning, keep talking to yourself, keep investigating what's going on with your body and how it's working. And just always, please remember that give your body some gratitude, because whether it feels like it or not, your body is always trying to adapt in your best interest based on the resources that you give it. So it may not always feel like it, but it's trying to work with you. So the more you work with it, the more you can accomplish when it comes to improving your nutrition.